Today we're going to be looking at the Mios, a small-sized daily stroller from Cybex. Cybex as a company does this weird thing where they divide their products into different classes, silver, gold, and platinum, based on quality and price. We've reviewed quite a few Cybex models, and I can say that this self-inflicted caste system is for real, reflecting huge differences in the quality of their designs. So while the EasyS Twist, for example, that we covered last, was a gold class stroller with a relatively weak and to some extent poorly thought out chassis design, the Mios is engineered much more sturdily in my opinion. This system as a whole is strange to me though, as it flies directly in the face of the traditional view of quality control to strengthen one's brand name. Thus, despite the ridiculously high price tag on some of their models, buying a Cybex is not just a matter of buying a Cybex because Cybex means quality, but more like a back alley street market. Don't have much money? That's okay. We've still got something for you. The problem with this thinking, however, is that it's not just a matter of the better strollers artificially pumping up the perception of their cheaper models. Perception goes both ways. If you bought one of their more problem-ridden models, like the Eternus, for example, or know someone who bought one, how likely are you to give them a second shot and fork over $1,000 for one of their premium models? In any case, there is this division within Cybex. Just know, as we begin this review, that the Mios is not the Eternus and it's not the Twist. It's a platinum model, priced high and thus responsible for all the expectations that come with that designation. Let's start off with some stats. The Mios weighs in at 8.7 kilos and folds down to 33 by 50 by 75 centimeters. It can take 17 kilos in the seat and 5 kilos in the underslung shopping basket. With regards to the seat, the Mios sports both a full recline and an adjustable leg rest. The canopy is large and extra long, giving good sun coverage. As far as the size of the seat itself goes, the main body of the seat is large enough, but the leg rest is quite narrow and will likely begin to feel a bit cramped for children over 2 and 2.5. As far as the textiles go, Cybex provides a couple of different options. This is the basic seat, which just has a mesh back, for ventilation as they say. But if you don't live in Hawaii or Saudi Arabia, then it'll probably be necessary to shell out a few $100 more to get the extra textile set, so your child doesn't freeze. When it comes to you, the parent, and your own comfort while using the stroller, I've got to say, I'm pretty impressed with the functional mechanisms on the Mios. Folding is very easy, accomplishable with one hand, and all the activation points seem quickly responsive, as well as pretty solidly constructed, though we'll get into this more in the mechanics section. When folded down, the Mios is pretty small as well, smaller than a lot of other strollers in its class, and it's easy to carry with an inbuilt handle. Its slim folded profile would have made it a perfect candidate for a shoulder strap, but I suppose you could just attach one yourself if you wanted. The textiles are relatively easy to remove in case you want to wash them, but can be a little fiddly when it's time to reattach them. As far as the shopping basket is concerned, its small size is probably the most cited complaint with the Mios other than the narrow footrest. And really it is a bit too small for a model of this size and weight class, being really more equivalent to ultra compacts like the Baby Zen Yo-Yo. But then it's a posh stroller for posh people, right? And it's not going to look that great all overstuffed anyway. When it comes to driving, the wheel size of the Mios is going to limit use primarily to urban and light suburban terrain. The inclusion of decent rear frame suspension and a pretty sturdy overall structure do help with this a little bit. But still, manicured parks and light cobblestone travel will probably work okay, but I wouldn't go much beyond that. Okay, let's have a look at the mechanics of the Mios, starting with the folding system. Okay, we're going to start off by talking about the folding system then, and there's really two parts to that on this stroller, as most of the time you will be folding the stroller with the seat attached. So in order to fold the seat so that you can fold the rest of the chassis, you just lift up on the handle on the back that adjusts the position of the seat, and then allow the whole thing to flip its way forward and fall down. What I like about this versus a lot of other strollers that fold with the seat attached is that the only real hinged point is that point that is already movable or hinged because it's the adjustment of the position of the seat. There aren't any other points on the seat frame itself that need to be hinged in order to fold that seat more compact. A lot of other strollers that fold with the seat attached do have this sort of a thing on the frame, and all of those points give sort of a weaker and more rickety feel to the seat frame itself. So you don't have that on this model, as you don't have on the Pre-M. It's essentially the same sort of a seat as on the Pre-M, and I think that's kind of nice. When it comes to the chassis itself then, you're going to activate the fold here at the top with this button. And what this is going to do is, of course, release these hinges on the sides that adjust the positioning of the handle. There's a wire that runs inside there from that button. And then when it pushes down to a certain point, the simple rotation of these two discs here is going to then pull and activate that internal line down to the central folding mechanism. So whenever you have this sort of double activation mechanism with these like internal lines and stuff, there is a danger that over time there is going to be some damage, especially at the points at which that internal line is held between one mechanism and the other. But that's just something that sometimes happens and can sometimes be a problem whenever you have internal complexity of this sort. Overall, because the stroller has a strong rigidity and a strong sort of symmetry, you have less of a chance of having those sort of problems, because usually that happens when one side weakens before the other, and thus you have like asymmetrical pressure being put on those internal lines. And overall, the structural symmetry of this model is pretty solid. So my guess is that will hold if you're pretty careful, those internal mechanisms. Okay, so once you then activate the central fold, which is sort of like a more simplified version of what Boogaboo uses, generally it's going to release these three arms from each other. There's a lot of similarities, by the way, with Cybex and Boogaboo engineering on several models. What that's going to do is then allow all the other hinge points of the chassis to fold towards each other. Now, another thing that I like on the Mios when it comes to this folding sort of overall chassis setup is these bars underneath. So if you look at that, that classic preamp look that has the double bars, those don't really serve much function on the preamp. It's just like a style thing, using 2 bars instead of 1. Whereas on the Mios, when you have this sort of double bar setup, these second bars are actually like creating a whole nother construction underneath the hinges. That's going to add stability to the model. It's also going to add a little bit extra, not exactly suspension, but sort of pressure against bumps in the terrain and stuff. Overall then, I actually really like the folding system and the overall setup of the chassis on the Mios. I think it's quite sturdy, even though it involves a lot of internal complexity in a few places. It's put together with a lot more precision than a lot of Cybex's other models, especially those silver and gold range models. Okay, we're going to have a little bit of a closer look at the rear frame then of this stroller. First thing I would point out is these nice large suspension units. There is quite good suspension on the Mios, primarily because of those large suspension units, but again also simply because of sort of the structure that these relatively thick bars make in relation to the entire folding down system. Unfortunately, all of that decent suspension is going to be ruined by the fact that the wheels are so small. So if this had larger wheels and like you took everything and sized it up a little bit, you'd actually have something that probably could handle some decent terrain. But because of those wheels, it's still going to get very jittery and difficult to drive if you really go over anything other than like really manicured parks, like lawns, like botanical garden type parks. You're not going to be able to go on forest trails and stuff like that. But in any case, it's still nice. It still does add a little bit of suspension, a little bit more drivability to the model overall, even though it has those small wheels. When it comes to brake system, it's again very nice. It has this internal rotating bar sort of a setup that's going to press out a pair of pins into the wheels. And one thing I like about this versus, say, the Preamp or the Balios is that the pins on the brake system are metal, and the plate that has the holes for that pin to shoot into is also made of metal. So that brake system is a brake system that's made to last. Quite nice. Okay, we're going to have a little bit of a closer look at the lower front frame then. So again, you're going to see these larger suspension springs, and again, you have that setup of those bars. And again, the entire ability to drive this over any sort of terrain is going to be ruined by the fact that those wheels are simply too small for it. So a little bit of extra suspension for handling those park roads and stuff, but other than that, the drivability is still smooth terrain. When it comes to the rest of the front wheel setup then, one thing that I kind of dislike on this, and that is kind of a common theme with a lot of Cybex strollers, is that the forks are a bit loose right off the bat inside those frontal housings. So if you pull this out, you can actually see that they've done this sort of double connection point. They have like a wider lip here at the bottom and the notch up at the top, which is nice, because what this means is that it's like it has 2 points which is holding that axle so that it can't do quite as much damage as it wobbles around inside the housing. But still, because of that initial looseness, there is a possibility that over time you're going to wind up having wobbly wheel problems, which means like when you're going too fast, those wheels might start to jitter a bit, which is unfortunate. It would be very easily fixed on a model like this that in other ways is quite premium in the way it's engineered, but that's just the way it is. It has a swivel lock setup. There's a metal pin that shoots down into a hole on the top point of the fork that will allow you then to lock those wheels in an inline position. You need this if you develop those wobbly wheel problems, or if you're going over terrain that you shouldn't be going over in the first place, since this thing is made for smooth terrain. But again, kind of nice, sort of a fail-safe to have that sort of a swivel lock setup. So, should you consider getting the Mios? For me, the answer to that question is very much based on whether you have both the money and the use for it. I think that given the price, especially for that next level up rose gold edition, the Mios is mostly a style piece. Its smaller than average leg rest, shopping basket, and wheels are all pretty limiting to how you can use it. And for its high price, there are a lot of other strollers out there that will provide a good deal more real-world functionality. That being said though, it's not a bad stroller, and there are a lot of pretty cool elements to it. Its thin chassis bars, relatively sturdy and user-friendly mechanisms, and its small and slim folded profile might all be really useful to someone who has the right lifestyle for it. I'm thinking New York or Tokyo, or maybe Dubai, and enough money to have someone else to carry all that stuff you can't fit in the shopping basket. In any case, we hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, we ask that you subscribe, as it helps us to continue making videos in the future. Thank you.